All right, you guys. So welcome to another video. In this video called Typescript for Beginners, I'm going to be showing you guys a very basic example of testing. And then every video after this video will just add a little bit more steps and a little bit more complexity to the testing process. But I think it's always good to start with something very basic. So what I have here is I have a TypeScript project running on my local host 3000. And if you guys don't know how to do that, at this point is, once you create a TypeScript project with Create React App, you just run a start script, whether you're using Yarn or NPM. So you just run NPM start to start the server. And then this will actually get the project that you've created actually up and running on your local server 3000. All right. And that's determined by our index here. So in our index, we have an app that we're rendering in strict mode and we're calling it by the root element. And that's how all React projects and TypeScript projects are usually set up from their root div. So after we run that command, we should see our application start to load in our browser. So I'm just going to give it another second or two and it should pop up. All right, and here we go. This is the application that we have. As you can see here, there's nothing on our actual index. It's just a regular React app with a gray background. So let's say we were just learning test-driven development, behavior-driven development, or just testing in general, and we wanted to just do a very basic example. So the first step that we would do is we would actually write a test that fails, make sure it fails, and then actually add the code to make it pass. So that's what we're going to do now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to our app.test.tsx file. And inside our app.test.tsx file, it has a test here that says this test is just going to be rendering a learn React link inside of our app. And we're expecting the link element and this text right here to be in the document. So let's go ahead and change this and say we want to create a new test, right? And the name of our new test is important because when it comes to behavioral driven development, then that's what we want to really focus on is that we should be able to read this and understand exactly what is being tested. So we're going to change the title of this to renders and input form. That's the name of our test. And what we want to test is render. And inside of that render, we want to have an input form. So we're just going to pass in the input form component and write our test. All right. It's a very simple test, but I want to show you the technique and the process of getting into this habit. So now that we've ran, or I'm sorry, corrected our original test that we had there, we want to go ahead and run npm test. And this is going to run our tests and it'll let us know if all of our tests are passing or if they're failing. So npm test, if you are using Node Package Manager, or Yarn test if you're using Yarn. So now it's determining which test to run, and it's running the only test that we've created so far, app.test.tsx. And looks like it said our test failed. Okay, so our test failed, and it's going to tell us exactly which test failed. And of course, we have some other problems. We can't find the input form because we didn't actually create it yet. But this is how it starts. You want to start with a test that does not work. And once we actually create this and actually start creating this actual input form, then you'll see the idea behind test driven development. So we see that our test is failing. So what we want to do now is we want to create a new file and we want to call it input form.txt. .ts, so inputform.ts, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to import React. We're going to import React from React. And we want to also import function component. And this is just saying that, hey, we want to let TypeScript know that we are creating a functional component and not some other sort of component like a class-based component. Okay. So once we do that, now we want to actually create our input form. And that's going to require us to do a couple of things. So we're going to need to have some sort of state, right? Because an input form takes in a value from our user. So let's import use state as well, right? And now we've imported that. Now we can actually go ahead and create our input form component. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a function and we're going to call it input form. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Now we're going to say const input form, and we're going to set the type of this function to a functional component. So function component, and then we're going to set it equal to an arrow function, and that arrow function is then going to return some values. So let's just, put our empty parentheses there because we need to set a couple things up. So before we actually start setting up our state and anything like that, we just want to do a simple return statement. And we want to say, we want to have a div with a class name of input form. All right. So we have a div with a class name of input form. We need a closing div tag. So don't forget to do that. And inside of our div, we want to have an actual input form. So we're going to say input type equal text. And we're going to give it a placeholder prop. And that's just going to say email. And then we'll close our input form and say dot, dot, dot. Let's just put an H1 right here. And it's going to say my email is dot, dot, dot. And so we're going to close our H1 and close our input. All right. And we should be good. So all we're doing here is creating two elements, a div and an input form. And actually, we don't even need to duplicate our code there. Remember that one of the principles of coding is don't repeat yourself. So we know that with JSX, we can just put a closing tag here at the end of our component, and that will actually wrap it up. So we have our div, we have our function, and we want to also make sure that we export our input form because we're going to be testing it. So we need to make sure that we export it and make sure that we can use it in other places inside our application. So now that we've done that, um, let's just check and make sure everything is working here. So we have a div, can't find name, class name. Something isn't closed here. Put form name. Video. Is that not working? Hold on. Let me start over because I need to redo this. Damn, I don't understand.